Hi, I'm Vicky. I'm glad you're here. Today I'm going to show you how to swatch like a pro. I'm going to swatch out my 24 Art Nouveau Gansai Tambi paints from Kuretake, which have just arrived from Amazon. I'm going to show you what they look like and swatch the entire set out for you. And I'm also going to show you my 36 set of Gansai Tambi paints from Kuretake swatched out as well. So let's get to opening this packet with all these yummy paints inside. So I'm taking off the plastic and I'm keeping any relevant information. So you can see that there is a colour chart and some information on the back about the qualities and properties of these paints. So it says that they are Japanese traditional paint for professional artists and crafters. It can be used as a gouache and watered down for use as a watercolour. Ideal for sketch, illustration, card making and more. So I'm going to put the instructions into my messy swatch book. And if you haven't seen this before, this is what I do whenever I purchase any new art supplies. I immediately swatch them into this book. And I do a quick and fast method, nothing too fancy. I cut out anything from the packaging that I think is relevant to keep. For instance, there's some information here which tells you how to use it. Apply water brush with colour to activate it. So I'm going to rough cut this with a pair of large scissors and use a glue stick and glue it into my book. There is also a colour chart with the actual names of the colours, and this is really key because in the packet itself there are numbers and Japanese lettering. So I want to know what the colours are called, and this is the best way for me to have a record of it. So this is going to get put into my swatch book as well. A little bit more information on the side. And I'm going to use this as my messy swatch. And you can see that there is space in the lid to make a colour chart. Now, I have not had a whole lot of success with these colour charts because, first of all, it's not on watercolour paper. It's just like a printer paper, I think, inside, and it's very small compared to the pans themselves. Now, I'll show you how I've swatched out my larger set. I started off by doing the swatch in the lid, and then I found that I couldn't tell which paints were which, particularly with these darker colours, and I kept digging into the wrong paint pans. So to fix that problem, I made a professional swatch card that fits exactly inside the lid and matches every single paint colour in the 36 set. And I'm going to do the same today with the Art Nouveau set, and I'll show you how I did it. We'll go step by step through it so you can do this too. So I'm not going to use that lid. I'm going to make my own swatch card to fit inside the lid. So for that, I'm going to use some Canson XL watercolour paper. Any smooth watercolour paper, which means hot press paper, would work for this. If you have 100% cotton paper, it would be even better. I'm also using a micron pen, and this is a 0.5, which is waterproof ink. I have this fabulous paintbrush from Kmart. It's a size 14 and it's got a lovely long handle and it is a flat brush. So for swatching rectangular shapes, you need a brush that has a head on it that looks a bit like a rectangle. Makes sense. It also has this palette inside the lids, and these are quite useful. You can mix colours on them. You can also put it over the paints so they don't move around if you're transporting them anywhere. You can put it on either way. There's one side where the ridges are up and another side where the ridges face down. It doesn't matter, either side works. I'm also going to be using a T-square and some washi tape. And the first thing I'm going to do is cut down that sheet of Canson XL watercolour paper to the same size as the lid. So take your ruler, measure up and cut away any excess. T-squares are great for this purpose. If you don't have a T-square ruler, you can use a regular ruler, but a T-square means you're making nice straight lines, perpendicular to the edge of the page or the edge of the box. And I'm just marking the shape out and bringing in my paper trimmer. You could cut this with scissors if you don't have a paper trimmer. And now I have a piece of paper that fits snugly inside the lid of the box. And that's what I'm going to be doing the swatching on. So the swatches are going to be the same size as the pans, which means I'm not going to get confused with colours. I'm going to use washi tape, so that's the star of the show here. Now I have some that's a little bit too big, I have some that's a bit too small, and I have some that's just right. So the just right size is 1/8 of an inch. I have 3 rolls of that, and I purchased these on Amazon. So just look up thin washi tape and you'll find those rolls. And now what I'm going to do is just take a pencil and make a check mark at each of the places where those pans are divided up. And in this case, I'm going to make a check mark in the centre of those white strips. And this is going to tell me where to mark off with washi the rectangle shapes. On the top and sides of my other swatch card, I don't have any washi tape. I've used washi just to divide up into those spaces where the pans fit. So I'm just going to draw in the lines now. And this is going to give me the guide for where to put the washi tape. And it's really a fast method once you have tried this a couple of times. It doesn't take all that long at all to get a really well divided gridded page that's masked off and easy to paint with. The thing I really like about this method is you don't have to be a really neat painter. You can just use the masking of the washi tape to help you stay within the rectangle shapes. Now the other thing I have here is you can see I have some lines drawn across, and this is going to help me see where there may be opaque paints, very dark paints, because that line will be obscured. What I found with the 36 set was that most of the colours were transparent. The opaque colours were the metallics and the whites and the really dark colours. I'm going to replicate those lines with my black micron marker, and once I've painted over the top of these lines, that's going to show me the colours that are opaque and those which are transparent. Any fine line black waterproof ink would work with this. Now it's time to grid up my page. This is the fun part. And I'm letting the washi tape come off the page on both ends because I want to be able to turn that over. Once I put some water and paint on this, the washi tape's going to want to curl up otherwise. So I'm going to fold those edges over onto the back. I'll show you how in a minute. So make your washi a little bit wider than your page. I'm just flipping it over and just fold them over to the back. That way they won't curl up when they get wet. And now I'm going to do the same in the other direction. And now you can see how it's starting to take it on the shape of the pans themselves. Just fold it over and we're ready to start swatching. First thing I'm going to do is wake up my paints with a little spray of water. I'm using the Distress sprayer from Tim Holtz, but you can use any spray bottle of water for this. Now I can quite clearly read the names of the colours in this colour chart that I've put into my messy swatch book, and I'm just going to roughly grid that up with a pencil, just very fast and simple, and add the colours in here as well so that I have them in my swatch book and on my swatch card. The colours also have numbers, but I don't find the numbers that useful. I like to know the names of the colours when I'm using them. You can buy these pans individually, so if you have some favourite colours that you keep using up, you can replace them by ordering individual pans. I love swatching. I find it very meditative, therapeutic, relaxing, all of those things. And if it's going to be a long swatching session, I usually pop on some favourite tunes and listen to music while I do it. I also think it's really important if you buy new art supplies that you use them straight away. You don't just put them in the cupboard and forget that you own them. And this for me is the best way to get them out and have a good play. The Gansai Tambi watercolour paints are a cross between gouache and watercolour, so if you use them at full strength, you'll get a flat gouache-like wash. If you add plenty of water, you're going to get that watercolour effect. And as we go through this, I'm going to do a second glaze on top of these paints so that I can show you what they look like as gouache. At the moment, I'm just creating watercolour by adding plenty of water to my colours. These are great for anyone who's just starting out in watercolour and wants to have some decent supplies. These are reasonably inexpensive compared to the professional grade paints. I have the Daniel Smith watercolours and I also have the Winsor & Newton professional watercolours as well. If you are struggling with water control and your paints are misbehaving and doing all sorts of things you don't want them to do, like running all over the place, or they're drying way too light, or you're just not happy with the watercolours that you're trying, these are really user-friendly. I wish I'd known about these when I first started watercolour, because I think it's a great way to play, get started, figure out what you can do with your water versus your pigment, and it just makes the whole thing so much simpler. I have a whole playlist of watercolour techniques on this channel for the beginner and for intermediate and for more advanced artists as well. So check those out. If you're a beginner, you would probably enjoy the free watercolour school that I am running. There are 6 videos in all, and it shows you how you can create using very inexpensive supplies. And you can get into watercolour without it costing you too much money. So that's Watercolour School. There are also a lot of greeting cards that I make using watercolour techniques. I love doing things like using Glad wrap, using salt, using wax paper, scratching into the paint, doing all sorts of fun techniques that are a little bit out there and a little bit different. So if you're looking for some ideas, have a look at the watercolour playlist that I have on my channel here. I'm going to pop on some music so you can watch me paint, and I'll get back to you once I've finished painting all the rectangles. So that's the first coating finished. And if I can show you the idea with this design here, you can see that I have the darker colours on the left hand side, which is the gouache, and the watercolours on the right. So I'm now going to go through and show you how I add in that gouache effect. So I'm taking paint with very little water on my brush. So there's more pigment than water this time. And I'm just pushing the bristles towards the top. So I'm holding them and making vertical lines on the left-hand side of each of the colours. And I'm going to just speed up this section so you don't have to sit and watch this entire process. But I'll show you what it looks like when I've finished. So that's the gouache on the left and the watercolour effect on the right. And remember, the gouache is the solid colour, whereas the watercolour effect, you're using a lot more water with your brush. So here's what it looks like dried, and here's the tape reveal. Oh, I love a good tape reveal. You can see how clean these rectangles are. And washi tape comes off really easily, which is why I curled the edges under so it wouldn't peel off before the paint was dry. And you can see what a beautiful, clean, professional looking swatch card you end up with. So I'm going to peel more off. This is very satisfying. I do like a good tape reveal. And you can see where I drew in the lines with the black micron pen. Some of the lines are showing through and some are obscured. And you can very clearly see where the gouache is and where the watercolour is. It's an interesting thing about gouache. With my other watercolour paints, my Winsor & Newton professional paints and my Daniel Smith paints, I use white gouache and add it to my colours, and that gives me the effect of a gouache-like paint too. Rather than feeling that you need to rush out and buy all sorts of different coloured gouache, I use a tube of Winsor & Newton white gouache and add it to my other paints for whatever colours I want to make. Now, if you look at the box here, you can see that there are no colours listed. The colours are actually on the back of the pans. You have to take them out and look on the back to find the colours. That's another reason I think swatching is so important. I can have the names of the colours written in. So here I am writing the first colour, saffron yellow, in, and I'm going to go through and do that with all of the rectangles until I have every colour labelled. I really like this 24 set of colours. I think the colours are rich and beautiful, and I think it's going to make for some really interesting abstract art pieces and very stylised pieces which reflect the Art Nouveau style of 1890 to 1914, and it was known for its decorative, colourful, natural style. So you can see how perfectly this lines up with the colours in the box. If you got something useful from this tutorial, consider giving me a like, subscribe to my channel, click on the bell so you don't miss any more videos, and leave me a comment if you have any questions, and let me know if you have the Art Nouveau set and if you're enjoying the colours too. I'll look forward to seeing you again next time. Until then, have a fantastically creative day. Enjoy using your beautiful watercolour paints. Thank you so much. Bye for now.